Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Do you have something you'd like some help with? Ask our guests. Go to professorgame.com/question and get your question answered in a future episode. Engagers, today we have one of our crew. She has said to me several times already that she does listen to Professor Game, and I'm sure quite a few of our guests do, but not all of them say it up front. So I'm pretty excited about this interview with Valary Oleinik. Am I pronouncing that right, Valary?
Yes, you get much better than 99% of the people.
So that's great. That's a massive badge for me.
Yes.
I must admit I'm excited about that part as well. So Valary, are you ready to engage?
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and do this. So Valary here is one part artist and one part geek, and has been accused of having contagious levels of passion and curiosity. Her path has twisted and turned in performing arts, computer support, business communication, and a lot more along the path to multiple roles in adult learning and development space. So very excited about the learning part of this as well, which is probably the main reason why we'll be meeting as well in Chicago. And also along the way, she decided that learners deserved better. So she set on a quest to uncover ways to disrupt boring traditional approaches to improve learner experiences and outcomes. As a result, Valary has become a consultant and a sought-after speaker at learning events across the U.S. She has contributed to a number of articles and publications on learning, creativity, and gamification, and is the creator of the Game Plan Framework for Gamifying Learning. That sounds like a lot of excitement and fun. So what are you up to, Valary? Is there anything that we have missed in this intro?
No, I think that's a good start. I think we'll probably touch on other things as we go along. But that's, I have kind of a varied and different background than some of your previous guests.
Very interesting. And in that sense, precisely to get to know you a bit better, we would like to know, what does a regular day with Valary look like?
Okay, well, I used to tell people that I was a project manager by day and a superhero at night, because I kind of had this secret side gig going on that was my gamification work. But yeah, by day I have like a regular 9-to-5 job at an international law firm where I'm a project manager. I work with training groups, and that's my main focus. I was a trainer there as well. I still do. It's a real mixed bag of things. I do technical support, troubleshooting. I still work with people that are customizing software for use in the law firm. I do data analysis. I help managers create presentations. It's a total mixed bag of things, and that's really cool. It's constantly lots of different things to work on. So that's a lot of fun, and it sort of satisfies the artsy and it sort of satisfies my arts and geeky sides. So that's cool. But then I actually have about a 1.5 to 2 hour commute each way to my day job. And I know it's, but what I did was, at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then I was like, you know what, let's just reframe this. And I think that's so much of sort of the gameful mindset, is just, okay, how can we look at this a little differently and make it better? So I was like, okay, I'm a captive for this time period. And so I read incessantly. I've read, I just, all the books I can, my Kindle's stuffed full. I spend that time with my tablet playing different games, experimenting with different games and different apps. Because a lot of times, it's like we get great ideas from games, but I get them from everywhere. Because you'll find great experiences everywhere. And so I look at that. So I spend the time doing that. I binge listen to podcasts like Professor Game. Everybody should be listening. If you're not listening to this on a regular basis, you need to. And then I plan, I spend it sort of planning out other projects that I'm working on. So whether it's speaking at conferences, or I do online and in-person workshops with higher ed, with workplace people in various sort of corporate and professional services type things. And recently I started doing some sort of online coaching sessions with another community of online learners that sometimes people forget about, which is there's a huge community of coaches, authors, consultants who are now creating online courses. And they don't necessarily have a lot of experience with designing, something for learning. They're experts in they're subject matter experts or something, but they want to have more engagement with their readers, with their audience, and whatever. So that's kind of fun. That's kind of a new niche of people that I've been talking to a lot recently. That's been kind of interesting. So
wow, many interesting things going on, right?
Yeah, I guess that's just my personality. I kind of like to have things, I'll keep my brain going in 100 different directions at once. And
so Valary, with all that success that I see that you're having, which is having all those things that you want to have, I'm sure that you've had many great moments, but there's one moment that I would also like to discuss in this interview, and it's especially to get people to understand that it's not always the good things that happen. Sometimes things that are not so good happen, but we can learn from them, and they certainly help us improve in our gamification design, in our e-learning design, in our ways to design things for people who need to learn something. So I would like to know if you have a story that you can tell us about your, what we like to call the favorite fail, or the first attempt in learning, and something that led you to either future success or massive learning. Can you give us that story, Valary?
Oh, absolutely. Listening to some of your previous podcasts, like I'm always like, oh, I know exactly. I know exactly which instance mine is. But yeah, failure. I like the fact that you're sort of putting this up front, and because people do have this, they sort of demonize failure, and they have this aversion. And it's not that we're seeking out failure, but it's how we're using it to learn. I tell people that success validates, but failure educates. And so I really love the question up front. But the thing that came to mind was several years back at the law firm, actually, because I have had the opportunity to use some gamification there, which is, it shocks people when they hear law firm and gamification. That doesn't sound like they go together, but they do. But we had an outside company that was going to be coming in and was going to be doing the integration and implementation of a new phone system. We were going voice over IP, and so they had, hooking it up with our network and swapping out all of the phone hardware. And they said, we have some trainers that will come in and train your users. And so we were like, oh, great, that's great. So we met with the trainers and some of our trainers and their trainers, and it immediately became apparent that they were not going to listen to us about the fact that we had two very distinct and different user populations. And they broke, gamification cardinal rule, like at least 1, 2, or 3 of, know your audience. They refuse to listen. And they kind of, yeah, we've done this before. We know what we're doing. And it was kind of like watching the slow motion car wreck. Like, you knew it was coming. You knew it was not going to work. And what I mean is we had, let's just for simplicity, we'll say we had 200 people. And so 100 of the people that were going to be trained really just needed to come in and take a look at the new phone, because when they came into work Monday morning, they needed to be able to use it. And they were going to be using basic functions, make a call, check their voicemail. They were very light users of the phone, for traditional users of the phone. And we said, okay, what you're planning is great for them. It'll be fine. They wanted to have a phone lab and people would come and try it out. And we're like, that's great. Okay. And they had like 45 minutes, I think. So we're like, cool, we'll schedule those people. It's voluntary for those people. They'll come in and they'll do that. But we had another group of users that were administrative assistants and things like that. And they had a very different need for phone skills. They have phones where they might have 12 or more phone lines ringing. They have, and they have to with utmost precision. This is a very prestigious law firm. You don't want to hang up on a client. You don't want to transfer them to the wrong voicemail box, or so their stress level, their anxiety level.
Delivery system.
Exactly. You're into like the ether. Like, I don't know where they went. They just kind of went away. But yeah, so you had like this other population that had this super high anxiety, super a much bigger need for different functionality, and really knowing how to do this day one and feeling comfortable with it. And they said, oh no, we do something very fun and gameful. And we're like, oh God, what is this? Like, we're like panicking by this point. We're just like, what are you going to do? And it turns out that what they did was, in the phone lab, all of the phones, the names on the phones were all superheroes. So that was very cute for the people who just wanted to come in and see the phone. They're like, hey, I'm Batman today, and they call their friend and like, haha, I'm Batman.
Hi, I'm Batman.
Exactly. Or like make fun of, the guy that, oh, you're Wonder Woman. How cute. You look cute in that skirt. They had fun with it. And it was fine because their stress level, they had no stress level. They were just kind of checking out it was like going to the Apple store. Like, they were just checking out the new gadget. They didn't really, care. Then you brought these other people in there and they were just panic stricken. And they were like, the second they walked in and saw this, like, they felt the trainers weren't taking it seriously and weren't taking them seriously when they see, comic book names and things. And they just kind of shut down. And it resulted in, we had to actually create a second training and retrain them. It was that bad. So
yeah, they got nothing out of it, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because they were just like, what? Like, I don't know what you're, like, and yeah, it was a mess. It was a total mess.
Sounds like an exciting mess.
It was.
It kept you busy for a while.
Yeah. So I think that's, know who your learners are, know who the audience is, and, respect that. So
yeah, that was my it's normally my follow-up question, which is what would you learn from that? And definitely getting to understand who your learners are and design for them is definitely one of them. But if there's something that you are presented with almost exactly the same situation today, what would you do differently? Because certainly you cannot change what these people think, but there's they always talk about what the things that you can control and the things you cannot control. Whatever it is within your control, would you do something different, or you feel it's just a path to failure that is never ending?
No, I don't think it had to fail. I think that the learners would have been okay with even with the superhero names if they had been sort of prepped for it. Like, a lot of times with using gamification, I always tell people, like, you have to be a little patient. You have to warn people. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you kind of have to, if something is going to be drastically different than the experiences they're used to, you have to acknowledge that. You have to kind of acknowledge that up front and kind of build that sort of safe space. And then I think also the way the learning was structured, unfortunately, was it was kind of too traditional in the sort of, here's the features of the phone, press this button, press that button, you'll make a call, you'll whatever. And instead, what we did in the sort of reboot, more scenario. We made it more real life. We made it, we made them more comfortable with, this is something you really do every day, and let's kind of experience it as you would be doing it in real life. So even if the name's on the phone, because it really didn't matter what the name on the phone was. It was kind of the way it hit them. It was just, they had sort of, they also, and this is sort of a cultural thing, I think, at that firm, is they were very hesitant, and they didn't like the fact that it was trainers they didn't know.
Okay.
So having, if we'd had the opportunity even to sort of have one of our trainers in the experience with them when they were doing the training, and had sort of a bridge there, I think that would have helped as well, because it was just too big of there were too many things changing all at once. It's a new phone. You're trying to be cutesy with me, and I'm not used to that, and I don't know you. So it was kind of this it was just like all these things. I think there were too many changes all at once, I think, was part of it. So if I was redesigning it, I would definitely, like I said, I would have had more bridging of expectations, more bridging of who they were working with, and I think that would have helped tremendously.
So engagers, you listen to this, and you always, as you are and as you should, you're thinking about your training, you're thinking about your class, you're thinking about your classroom in the university, your K-12, whatever it is that you're thinking, and you're thinking, well, how do I implement this? How is this useful to my my daily practice. And for me, it's quite clear. And if it's not still clear for you, you have to bridge the expectations. I mean, you have to see how you let people know some things in advance. Don't give everything out. Don't kill the surprise that you've been preparing, but let them know that some things are going to be different. The managing of the expectations is always fundamental. And of course, they always say under promise and over deliver, for sure. But if you over-deliver way too much, it might be a scary moment depending on who your audience is. So consider your audience and get them ready for whatever you are preparing them for.
Yeah, you want to surprise and delight, but you don't want to freak them out. You just don't want to scare them away.
Exactly. And in that sense, now that we've gone through the valley, let's go now to a peak. How about we talk about a time that you have felt that whatever it is you did, this experience you designed, or this training you designed, this learning experience that you created for, whether it's, again, in the law firm, in whatever else you've been doing around the rest of the things that you've been have going on, something that you could say, well, this was fantastic. I was prepared for this. Everything happened as I wanted to, or I failed initially, and then I pivoted and did all these things, and it worked fantastically. And it's something that you're certainly and you better be very proud of. So let us know what that story is, Valary.
Okay, well, I think I am going to stick with the law firm because this is actually related to the case study that I'm going to talk about at GamiCon. So I want to use this one, I think. But basically, what happened was we had a project, and it had about a 2-year scope, and we were using an outside vendor to host the course. It was it was a blended learning, and so the online portion was being hosted by a vendor who had also helped us with the design. And this was sort of our first big. It was very gamified. It was early gamification, where we've learned things since then, but it was gamified. And halfway through the program, I got a call from the vendor, and they said, "We'd like to come in and talk to you." And I'm like, "Oh, that doesn't sound good." And it wasn't.
Have a quick chat.
We'd have to have a quick chat, yes. And basically what they came in to tell us, it was 2 people from the vendor, the 2 managers who had sponsored it in-house. And so the 5 of us met, and they basically told us that they were closing their business.
Oh, very
and
cool.
we were like, "Oh, okay." And everybody's eyes just kind of turned to me, and they went, "So you can fix this, right?" And I had been so immersed in it from the beginning, and so I knew the program inside and out. I knew everything about it. I had been facilitating the online portion. I was so super comfortable, and I just kind of went, "Yeah, sure, yeah, we can do this." So I had 6 weeks because it ran on a 6-week cycle. So I had a 6-week period, and they basically turned over all the content files to me. Downloaded the website basically and sent it to me, and they said, "Okay, here you go." And I remember leaving there, and I just had this moment of, okay, this is either going to be the most wonderful opportunity and challenge of my life, or this is going to just be the biggest failure ever. And but I was determined. I was like, you know what? I like a challenge, and I also think that one of the learning things for me out of it was, because it was a long project, and I see this happen with a lot of instructors, is, we start out very excited about new programs and new projects and things like that. And then over time, we've taught the same thing over and over and over and over, and we start to lose a little bit of our passion and interest in whatever the project is. And we sort of
the novelty is gone. So
exactly, the novelty is gone,
it's just
and
natural.
Yeah, and you're just kind of going through the motions. And I do come from a performing arts background, so for me, it's always been very important. Like, every audience is their first time seeing this show, so I kind of have that. As part of who I am and how I approach things. But I noticed that after a while, when you're doing the same thing over and over, even when it's different classes, you kind of need a reset now and then. And so for me, this was a wonderful opportunity. And I tell people, I encourage people, one of the wonderful side effects of gamifying a course that has not been gamified before is that the instructor is going to find new passion and new interest in that course, in most cases. if they're the ones participating in, in the design process, not it's just one of these is kind of handed to them kind of thing, or imposed on them. But so I think that was really wonderful. I was like, this is going to be a great challenge. This is going to be fun. And I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show MacGyver, where he, has like duct tape and like spare parts, and he puts together things and solves these, problems. That's kind of what I felt like.
He can escape a jail with, like a plastic bottle and some salt. Exactly. So that's kind of how I approached it. I kind of said, you know what, we're just going to make this into a game. We have 6 weeks. So it was like, there's a time frame. That's like a game. We have a time frame. We have a challenge. We have to get this program from where it is over to some new platform or something. We know what all the objectives are. We break it down and whatever. And I just, I kind of made it like a mission. And I had I had to deal with all the various people that I had to negotiate with to make this happen, and they were some of those were boss fights in the almost literal sense. And so I kind of approached it that way, and I said, okay, well, what parts do I have? What resources do I have in my bag? And I just had some fun with it, and I think it really. It helped me appreciate, and it's something I now, pass on to others I work with. It's like your learners will tolerate little bumps along the way. They will tolerate if something didn't quite work right, as long as you are showing that you're being authentic and you really care about this and you're trying something new. And I really did have to go in when we sort of did the reboot with that first group and go, okay, this is maybe not going to be perfect, but we're, hang in there. We're working on it together. And because it was kind of, I put together with duct tape and gum and, and I wasn't sure all the parts were going to hold. Pinch of salt.
And exactly. I wasn't sure all the parts were going to hold, but I really think that was, I feel very proud of that I got it. I did it. I got the program rebooted, and it finished out its scope, and it was actually so popular that they wanted to bring it. It was run initially in just our New York office, which is our main office, but they wanted to bring it to some of the other offices, and it was only because of some economic issues that happened about that time that didn't happen. But to me, I was very proud of that. I was very proud that other people noticed that it did actually, and more importantly, it actually got results. I mean,
that's fundamental when you're doing these things, and it's something to certainly be proud of, Valary, and congratulations on that. I hope to get a lot more of that in Gamicon. And speaking of Gamicon, I just want to make a quick break in this talk, and we kind of mentioned it in the beginning, but Valary is going to be at Gamicon in Chicago, and we've had the interview with Monica previously, where you can listen to what's going on in Gamicon, why it's exciting, all the good things that are going to happen at Gamicon in Chicago, and I invite you to listen to that. And of course, there's also an interesting, let's call it opportunity for any of you engagers who might be willing to go or are interested in going to Gamicon. There's a few benefits for being part of the engagers if you go through the link. So listen to Monica's interview as well, if you haven't already, and take action on that link if you want to have some special benefits by going to Gamicon, and listen, of course, there to Valary, who's going to be talking about all these challenges that she faced and how she went all in and solved all these things like MacGyver.
Yay! Yes, come join us. Everybody should come. Everybody should come. I don't know how we'll fit everybody, but everybody should come.
I hope to meet many of you in Gamicon as well.
Yes.
So Valary, is there when you were designing something that is meant to be gamified, do you follow some sort of a process? We were talking about the interview in the intro about your game. I'm not sure of the full name, but about that process that you have. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Sure. So, I first and foremost, kind of like I mentioned a minute ago, like we got results. First and foremost, it's always about the learning. I just want to say that, and I love that you in previous episodes have sort of rebranded instructional design as learning experience design, because I think that making that shift is vital to people having successful gamification. Because so much of instructional design is here, I'm going to package this content and I am going to give it to you in some way. Whereas the learning experience design to me is paying attention to how the learner is consuming it. So I love that shift that you have talked with other people about. So I just want to, you get another badge. See, hey,
I'm gonna turn into Boy Scout anytime.
But to answer the more specific question, I try to, I call it the game plan because it's just sort of my framework that I use when I work with people. I think it's sort of simple to help them get started, because a lot of the people I'm getting started with are very they've never tried it, they've never gamified anything. They're a little nervous about it. They don't have a lot of background in it. Their background is generally, in education. They know how to teach. They know how to put together a class, but they don't know this piece of it. So just to make it sort of simple for them, I break it down, and each letter in game stands for a key element. So the G is for goals that, I hammer into people. Like, if you don't have a clear picture of what you're trying to achieve, why you want to gamify something, what the end result is going to look like, you have to have that. And it's not just learning objectives, but there's usually a larger level or an overlaying level of why you're gamifying. So, there's learning objectives of a specific course, but then there's, okay, we're trying to build engagement. What is the metric you're looking for? How do you know if you've done that? So that's a goal. And then sometimes there's even a higher level goal. I had a professor recently who, she had certain metrics she wanted to achieve as far as building more engagement in her course. But what I found out later through talking to her is that there was an overriding goal, which was the dean of her college was pushing her very hard to get her pass rate up. And there was this struggle between, she didn't want to make the course less rigorous, she didn't want to dumb it down, which I never would suggest people do. But she was kind of in this this death grip with her dean, like that they wanted the pass numbers up, and she was like, well, I'm not dumbing things down, and she was struggling with how to restructure her course to try to make it better. So goals is the first piece. So the A in game plan is for audience, and we talked about that already. If you do not have a clear picture of who your audience is, you're setting yourself and them up for failure. So being clear on the audience. The M is for mechanics, but not in the sense of game mechanics specifically. This is the piece where we talk about all the like actually being a mechanic. What are all the pieces that you need to put together? What is the content? How are you going to do it? Are you going to use video? What type of LMS or learning system are you working in? What are all the moving parts? And where are some places for us to infuse some gameful elements and that would be appropriate to reach the goals that you already told me you have? So again, they all have to tie together. So the goals give me the endpoint, and then the M in that sort of section, I can figure out the activities that will get the learner there. And then the E is for experience, because all of this, and it's not a linear 1, 2, 3 process, but the experience, it all has to be wrapped together as an experience, how the learner is experiencing it, the learner experience design piece, also sort of the ecosystem that the learner exists in. What is the firm culture if it's a corporate environment? What else does the learner have going on in their lives? We have to remember when we design things that whatever we're doing is something new that this person has to fit into their life in some way.
Definitely. It's part of their personal experience.
Yeah, that we forget that piece. And so I a lot of times I see people design things and they're like, oh no, this is perfect. And I'm like, it's not accessible to, these type of people. Like, if you have learners that are like this, they're going to struggle with that. And then also, if it's a long-term project like the 2-year one I talked about, you have to think about how this is going to be supported over time. That's part of the experience. How it's going to change over time. Somebody coming into the system, if they're participating long-term, like, they're going to need different things and want different things at day 1 than they are at day 100. And so how is the system going to, what do you have built in to let it evolve and, sort of that emergent feel to it. So that's the framework that I try to.
There you go. It's goals, audience, mechanics, and experience. So never forget what game means for Valary, because it's her process, and it makes, it's perfectly sensible and makes a lot of sense. There's many things, many branches you can take within all those initials that she's giving away. We've heard many different things, but I invite you to incorporate this because it's a pretty interesting approach, and the simplicity is something that I love to support because it makes it easier for and more accessible for other people to implement it as well. Many of our engagers I know are doing this for the first time, are just testing out, and this is an opportunity to not to dumb it down, but to simplify it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Hey, just a quick break before we continue with the episode and with Valary. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media so that we can increase our engagers. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So now, Valary, we're going to go into what we call the second part of this interview, and it's those of the quick answers. So the first thing that we would like to know is if there's anything aside, of course, from your game initials, anything that you would say is something that any gamification project could, especially for learning, could benefit from, and say, if I do these kinds of things or if I do this thing, that would make the project a little or a lot better in that sense. Is there such an element or a good practice that you would say a best practice?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go counter to some of the previous guests and kind of build on it. I know a lot of people, it's know your audience, and I have obviously promoted that as well. I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to say respect your audience, not just get to know them, but trust them. And trust them to have some freedom. So give them choices. I think one of the easiest ways for people to get started with gamifying things that don't have a lot of experience with it, I'm a big proponent of the self-determination theory. And if you can give the learner some autonomy, give them a choice between doing two different activities, or give them a choice of how they complete an activity. Anytime you can do that, and that leads into their competence, because if they're making choices about how they're participating, they'll feel more confident, they'll feel more comfortable. So I'm a big proponent of giving them choices.
That's fantastic. Giving the choiceful and the capacity of your audience to make decisions is fantastic and very, very useful as well, very engaging. And Valary, what would you say is your favorite game? And this is probably one of the most difficult questions in the podcast.
It is. The second half is so hard. But I've always loved games that have story. When I was little, I can remember one of my first favorite games was Clue. I love figuring out who done it. So I've always liked those kind of, and I played the early PC games and things like that action games, and I've done the whole RPG thing too, and whatever. And I was trying desperately to come up with one really good one as a favorite, but what I came up with was one that I played recently that kind of stuck with me. I'm not going to say necessarily favorite, like I want to play it over and over for the next, forever. But it's a small game. It came out several years ago, and it's now available on mobile devices, and it's called Beholder. And the reason I picked this one was it's actually very dystopian. It's kind of dark, but I think it is a wonderful example of providing meaningful choices. And since I was just talking about giving people choices, I think this game is just, if people play it, and I'm a big proponent, I do whole workshops having people play games and deconstruct them. And I think if people play this game, it just really, it kind of sticks with you. Because of the choices, and it's not an obvious choice like too many e-learning courses I see. It's like you learn something and then they give you a little quiz and you make your choice and it's either right or wrong, and maybe they go the extra step of saying, oh, you got that wrong, here, click this to go reread that section, or here's some information you should have considered, or whatever. But this is much deeper in the good game sense of a choice you make in this turn doesn't show up until a little further down the road, and that's very real life. I mean, we get immediate feedback a lot of times, but we don't get feedback about the long term. We can't get feedback about the long term ramifications of a choice we made right now. So I'm gonna throw that one out there because anybody's mentioned it, and I find it, and the design of it is very, it's an attractive game, which I know that sounds kind of shallow, but I think that's important. I think if things aren't somehow attractive, don't attract people's attention, and they don't want to look at it, or it's hard to use, or
interact with it in any way, then they'll probably won't.
it's not gonna be very good.
So Valerie, is there anybody that you haven't listened to in this podcast who you think has not been in Professor Game and you would like to listen to him or her in an interview, like with these questions or in a similar setting?
Yeah. So who would I want to put in the hot seat? No, I struggle. Oh my gosh, I struggled thinking about who I wanted to say. I have a couple of names actually. I'm going to say J.D. Dillon. He's very active on Twitter, and he works for a company that does do gamification in the corporate space, among other things, and whatever. But I've actually met him in person, and he's always really interesting to talk to. And I haven't heard him talk for a while, so I'm throwing that name out there. So he would be more in the corporate side of things. I also a couple of K-12 people that I'm starting to watch, because I like to watch people in different spaces, because whoever's in if somebody who's doing gamification in higher ed right now, if I'm in the workplace, I'm going to see your learners in the next couple of years, because they're going to come out of higher ed into, entry-level positions at companies, and I want to know what their expectations of learning are. So I'm a big proponent of looking at things across, I don't stick just to, I only want to know about people in, a specific industry or something like that. So two quick K-12 people. Michael Matera, he goes by Mr. Matera on Twitter. Yes, Twitter and YouTube. He's got awesome stuff out there. I'd love to hear him.
He's got a book. He's got a podcast.
He
does.
Very
interesting.
He'd be a lot of fun. And also in the similar vein would be Chris Avales, who's the teched up teacher on Twitter, and he does some interesting things. The little bit I know about it, he does some interesting things with his students. He's been working with some, I think, companies and different things, and they work on projects together. And so I think that would be kind of interesting to see how he's crossing, taking schoolwork and working with industry and all that. So those are going to be the ones I'm going to throw out there.
In that same vein, is there a book that you would recommend to the engagers?
Yes. Okay. And in the same vein, I kind of tried to think about different places that people are. For K-12, I'm going to say Greg Topo's book, The Game Believes in You. Came out a couple of years ago. I think it's got some really good examples of some really cool things that people have been trying. For higher ed people, I'm going with Kevin Bell's Game On, which there was another book earlier by the same title, but his is Game On, Gamification, and I wrote this down so I'd make sure I get it right. Gamification, Gameful Design, and the Rise of the Gamer Educator. And what I like about that one is he does a series of case studies with professors who have tried gamification, and they do just what we're talking about today. He kind of does the what worked, what didn't work. He debriefs the whole thing, and I think that would be my pick for people who are in the higher ed space, or for anybody, because again, read everything. And then adult learning, I'm going to go off the gamification script for a second. And I'm going to go with Captivology. It's the science of capturing people's attention by Ben Parr. And I'm putting this one on there because, again, I think so much of getting into gamification is really just turning your creativity loose, trying some new things. And if you can't capture people's attention, then you're not going to go anywhere. You kind of have to have their attention, build the curiosity, and then the learning. Then you can get to the learning.
All gamification elements for sure, and there's many ways to capture attention within gamification. And I'm sure that the book, I haven't read it, so I can't speak of the book. But even if they say it with other words and they don't mention games and gamification, you could frame those as games or gamification for sure. Yeah. And what would be what would you could call your superpower? And now that you were a superhero for a while, Valerie, what would you say is your superpower in gamification and instructional or learning experience design? That was a complete mess up.
That's okay. We can call it. People are going to call it all sorts of different things, and I don't want people to get hung up on the words. It's a lot of people are doing gamification and don't realize they're doing it because they just call it something different. But I'm going to go with. I think my superpower is I inspire curiosity. I kind of I've been told I'm kind of quirky, and I kind of put people at ease, and I get them to try things. So I think I'm going to go with inspire curiosity.
Fantastic. That's a fantastic one. And finally, Valary, we would like to know, because as we mentioned a while ago, you're going to GamiCon, I'm going to GamiCon.
Yes.
I hope many of the engagers are going to go to GamiCon, because I'm excited about getting to know you in person if I haven't already, and to meet again if I have already met you before. But we would like to have that 1-minute pitch of what are you going to be talking about and why it would be exciting to listen to your talk at GamiCon.
Sure. Okay. So my workshop is called 4 C's to an A+ learning experience, and it's going to be part case study and part hackathon. So it's going to be very fast paced. We're going to be in groups, and we're going to have some rules. It's going to be a little bit of a game. You're going to have some rules that you have to abide by, and you're going to sort of brainstorm and come up with a quick prototype to solve a specific problem that I have solved in the past, and then I will share with you kind of how I did it, and we can compare notes. And so it's going to be fun. It's going to be very fast because it's short. The sessions are very short, so it's going to be very fast paced. So, but yeah, I hope everybody comes. And it is a workplace example, but again, the elements could be applied in many other contexts as well.
Definitely. So Valary, thank you very much for this interview, for your time, for your passion and your enthusiasm, all your ideas, all your stories. This has been a blast for me. I don't know if you want to give any final piece of advice to the engagers, and then let us know where we can find you, because I am part of your email list. So let people know where we can be a part of that email list, listen to you a bit more, and then we'll say it's game over.
Okay, I guess we found the droid we were looking for, or save the princess or something. That's when game over comes, right? So I think my final bit of advice is just go out, play some games, have some fun, start small, try one little thing, and build on it. I think people panic sometimes because they think they have to, go all in, or go big or go home, and just start small. So that would be my last little nugget for people. To connect with me, I am Valary with a Y. That's VALARY WITHAWHY. Pretty much everywhere. So on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere. My website is ValaryWithAY.com. So you can connect. I love talking to people. So please get in touch. And yes, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, just go to the website. There's a link right there. And this has been a blast. I'm so excited and thankful that you let me come and hang out with you today.
I'm happy that you accepted and that you're happy to be here. That makes me even happier. So this is a mountain of happiness. Yay! Over here. However, engagers, thank you for listening. Thank you, Valary, for coming. But now it's time to say it's game over.
Thanks. Bye now.
Engagers, perhaps you've already heard of Monica Cornetti in some of our previous episodes. She's been a guest twice. She has also a fantastic podcast called Gamification Talk Radio. There, she interviews great guests that talk about the gamification of learning, especially in corporate settings. I think you might be quite interested in listening to this podcast like I do. So I'd suggest you check it out on your favorite podcast app. I'll also have a link to it in the show notes of this episode. And thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. If you want more details of this interview with Valary, you can go to professorgame.com/podcast/047. Hey, and would you like to know what is the process that Bart Hufen uses to get more clients for gamification? Then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!